I travel a lot for work, covering Formula One and IndyCar races, and I'm always jumping onto different Wi-Fi networks, and I like to make sure that my information is staying secure. So that's why I use a VPN. First and foremost, security is of utmost importance, especially when connecting to unfamiliar networks. So private internet access ensures that your online activities remain secure, even when you're on the move. By encrypting your internet connection, it prevents anyone from intercepting your data or eavesdropping on your online communications. This means you can browse with confidence and peace of mind. So if you want to enjoy all the benefits of private internet access, now's the time to subscribe. Head to piavpn.com/nailingtheapex and get an 83% discount. Seriously, 83%! That's just $2.03 a month. And you also get 4 extra months completely for free, but you must go to piavpn.com/nailingtheapex for a truly private digital life. Once more, it's piavpn.com/nailingtheapex.
Get in on the action and make your bet with Sports Interaction. Summer is heating up with baseball. Can the Jays make a run at the division?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Hey, but you can bet before the game, whichever way you think. Live and in play and all your favorite teams and hot dog contests. Woo! Woo! SportsInteraction.com/STPN or download the app to get started. It's 19 plus. And what do you have to do, Steve?
Please play responsibly.
Welcome to Nailing the Apex, everyone. I'm Tim Haraney. Please head on over to Spotify, give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well. Rate a review. So it really helps us grow the show. You can watch us on YouTube and you can follow me on social media at Tim Haraney. Joining me for part 1 of our midterm report card is Adam Wild. Adam, you're out in the country somewhere. What are you up to?
I am. Family cottage. I am in my in-laws' bedroom, so just keeping it cool. It's funny because there's so many kids here. I think there might be 5 or 6 kids under the age of 5. There's nobody over the age of 5 here. This door is behind 2 separate doors. There's a door that slides that cuts the bedrooms off from the rest of the cottage, and then their door. So it's the only way I could guarantee that I would get some soundproofing. So this is where we're at, man.
Sounds like McLaren's technology center. There's hidden doors everywhere, and behind those, there's more hidden doors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I'm ready though. I'm a little sad that we're not going to get a race for another month, but I'm also kind of pumped about how great this season's been so far, and I think underrated. A lot of people are being hard on it, but I think they're wrong.
Yeah, I agree. If you're wondering why my face is so red, just got done a run. So, if you want to watch me sweat this one out, head on over to YouTube. You can see that. Okay, good, so, to do this, we're going to break down all 10 teams. So, slowest to fastest, grade the team performance. Then we'll tackle the drivers. So, our grades will be as follows: A+, A minus, B+, B minus, et cetera, till you get the picture, all the way down to F. And we'll begin with AlphaTuari, who's got 3 points in the constructors' standings. They're last, obviously. And we'll start with just upgrades real quick so people kind of know where they are with the car, and then we can move on to internal and et cetera, et cetera. So they introduced a new rear wing and a beam wing in Austria. They brought an almost brand new car to the British Grand Prix, which was round 10 of the championship, if I'm not mistaken, which included a new floor body, floor fences, floor edge, diffuser, engine cover, bodywork, rear suspension, rear wing, beam wing development. And so this car has gone through a major transformation from where it was at the beginning of the season up until the last race that we've had, which was the Belgian Grand Prix. But Adam, they've also had some internal restructuring going on at this team, aside from obviously the drivers. The announcement a few months ago that team boss Franz Tost would be leaving the team at the end of the season, and then it took them a while, but they had announced this a few months ago, where they were like, yes, Laurent Mekies from Ferrari, he's going to come over and he's going to be our team boss for next season. And then Ferrari basically saying, what's that? So this statement came out, and then it wasn't until the last race weekend before summer break that they were finally able to put out the announcement that Laurent Mekies will be the team principal at AlphaTuari. I mean, Adam, you can't make it up, man.
It's been a mess. I think the season started off poorly. You knew things were bad when Franz Tost comes out and says, I don't trust my engineers.
Yeah.
Imagine what it takes for you to say that publicly. This is a guy who's an experienced guy. What, he's been the manager there or the team principal for what?
Long
10, 20
time.
years?
A long time, yeah.
Like a long, not 20 years. 20 years is too long, but a long time. And I think, he's seen some amazing drivers come up through the ranks for Verstappen and Kvyat and Ricardo and Sainz and some of the, some of the best of the Red Bull Young Driver program. It's all gone through him. And I am really sort of at a loss as to how one franchise, which is, the Bulls, can have one car at the top and one car at the bottom. I know that there are, limitations in terms of what they're able to share between teams, which is like nothing, apparently, even though we all know, those rules are sort of loosely enforced. It's a total mess, and it's time for a change. And it might not be Franz's fault, but Tim, I'd be surprised if they go into next year with like the same engineers as well.
Yeah, because it's like with every new team principal that comes into an F1 team. Right, Adam. I mean, they want to put their stamp on the team. I mean, we've seen it so far with Frederick Vasseur, which is something we'll get into in part 2 of this podcast. But I mean, for a team principal, when they come in, it's kind of like a head coach, right? They always want to come in and bring in, their people, so they can have people that they trust in pretty important positions. But the problem is then you get all these different layers of restructuring within the team itself, and that takes time. It takes a long time to make that shift, to make that move. I mean, if you take Williams, for example, again, we'll get into them. They're kind of an example of that. Another sort of disappointing part in all of this has been their driver lineup, not necessarily Yuki Tsunoda, but Nick DeVries out after the British Grand Prix. He had a disappointing start to the campaign, and then in comes Daniel Ricciardo. So, looking at their season as a whole, just very inconsistent on that front. I mean, I think the only saving grace for this team so far has been the standout performances from Yuki Tsunoda. I mean, we had mentioned that they had a horrible start to this season. The car was the slowest on the track to start, was not good in slow speed. They've started to look like, they've come alive a bit over the last few races, but I think, Adam, for me, I need to see a bit more to be convinced, so I'm going to give the team as a whole a grade of C.
Okay, you're going to give them a C. Wow, that's nice. I'm giving them a D. I think if you're and there's only one team I would give a worse ranking to, and we'll get to them. And maybe we should kick each off with our ranking, because I could have debated you on the C. I think you're being really kind. There's no excuse for this team to be where they are. This should be a mid-pack team every year, lock. And, Red Bull is extremely hard on their drivers, right? We know this. We know Helmut Marko's out there trashing Nick DeVries in the papers after like 3 or 4 races, which, when we get to our drivers, I think it was really unfair. At the end of the day, the team needs to be held accountable for that car. That car was horrible. And Yuki Tsunoda has made something of it. He's been amazing this year despite that. If you're trying to develop drivers for your Red Bull A program, how do you expect them to develop properly if you can't even put on the same car that Haas or Williams or Alfa Romeo? Like it's just unacceptable. You can never start a season like that. They should be fighting with Alpine. They should not be fighting with those guys. So I'm a D on them.
Drivers, we'll start with Yuki Tsunoda, 17th in the standings. He's got 3 points. I gave him a grade of B+. Yeah. He captured a point in Australia and really flattering that car at the start of the season. Point as well in Azerbaijan. Same goes with the Belgian Grand Prix. I think he could have had a 9th in Barcelona, but got that penalty for forcing Zhou Guanyu off the track and dropped him out of the points. But a grade of B+ for Yuki from myself, and I would say just getting close to an A, because I think for a driver who's in the final year of a contract, he needs another one for next season. A lot of pressure on his shoulders coming into this season, this campaign, and to prove himself, right? Because the first 2 seasons, well, they weren't that great at him. But yeah, for Yuki, I'm giving him B+.
And I'm right there, similar with you. My grade was a B. Worst car on the grid, constantly in at least the heat for the lower points at certain points. You see him up in 13, 12, 11. Genuinely, he was much better than Nick DeVries. But I think what's going to be great about Daniel Ricciardo on this team is that we know Daniel is now fast again, and we know he can be fast. And I think next year we're talking about both of those guys going for Sergio Perez's seat at Red Bull in 25. And so if that's the case, that is going to be one of the most competitive driver lineups on the entire grid, because I don't think there's any way that I don't think Daniel's moving up this year. I don't think he doesn't want to race next year, so he's going to be in an AlphaTauri seat or a Hugo Boss Racing Bulls, whatever they want to call themselves at that point, if the rumors are to be believed. I think Yuki, if he can keep his emotions in check, which has always been the knock on him, if he can stay focused, this guy really, I mean, it's hard to say he doesn't have a ceiling when Max Verstappen is on the track, right? Because he's so unbelievable. But Yuki Tsunoda should be a top 5 driver in Formula One in a couple of years if he keeps this up.
Daniel Ricciardo, I mean, it was hard to grade Ricciardo. I mean, obviously we haven't really seen enough from him. Obviously 21st in the standings with 0 points, but he's only done two races, but he had a good start in Hungary, messed up his quali in Spa, which probably would have been a very good qualifying performance from him if he hadn't have gotten that, he got his lap time deleted in qualifying. And so he had a good shootout and sprint race and then had an okay Belgian Grand Prix. I'm going to give Daniel a B- just simply because of all of his experience coming back into F1. I think he's done a really nice job to kind of get things off on the right foot here.
I'm going to say the same, except I'm C+ on him. And I say this as a compliment. If he had come in and not beaten Yuki in his first race, which he did, and then not beat him in the sprint, which he did, people would have said, and rightly so, hey, well, it's the worst car on the grid, give him some time to adjust, but he didn't seem to need it. And honestly, like, I know, he did mess up his qualifying in Spa, and then, they kind of stuck him at the back of the grid. But what blew me away is how much he turned it around. You have to think about where Daniel was in like November when we're watching him on the Formula One feed, maybe saying goodbye for the last time. Oh, I'm going to take a year off. He just looked dejected. And the fact that he is able to put on the times that he could put on and be as competitive as he is in that short amount of time is really, really impressive. So 2 races, grading him on some results. I'm giving him a C+, but I'm really impressed with Daniel Ricciardo, and it's so nice to see, and it's good for the sport.
Yeah, just to add a little more context to just how much Daniel had to work to get back on to the grid. Like you said, Adam, at the end of November, just sort of a shell of his former self in terms of his driving capabilities, and really lost his way.
He didn't believe in Daniel, right?
Essentially. And so I think for Red Bull, when Red Bull got him back, even Christian Horner was telling us like they didn't know who he was. He just looked like not the same Daniel Ricciardo that had originally left the Red Bull program to go to Renault. So they had to spend a lot of time working with him in the simulator. They brought back one of his old race engineers from his time at Red Bull Racing when he was performing really well. And they really look like they've got him back on the right track. I think he's put in the time and the effort. I think he's done a really nice job of keeping his fitness going, because I think for a driver like, Formula One driver, you have to keep your fitness levels high, but it's hard to stay motivated to do that when you don't have anything to sort of look forward to, or a race to look forward to, or competition. So I think for Daniel, he just did a really nice job of just maintaining everything, kind of getting back to the old ways of things for himself and going out and kicking some ass on track here. For Alfa Romeo right now, 9th in the constructors. They've got 9 points. I'm giving this one a C-. They haven't. I mean, we'll start with the upgrades. I can confirm that the team will introduce upgrades for the car after the summer break, so they're not really shutting down that upgrade sort of pipeline. But again, they haven't done a ton with this car, but I think the team hopes that it'll turn around and be a point scoring machine after the summer break. But they brought a big upgrade to the British Grand Prix that was supposed to help them in the high-speed corners. But then when we got to Spa, I mean, the team just really wasn't competitive at all. I think they've struggled significantly throughout. I think Spa was a bit of a mess for them. Like I'd mentioned, cars qualifying 14th and 17th, Bottas finishing 12th. And he admitted that this is where the car is at the moment. It is the 12th quickest machine. And I think for a driver like himself, I don't think he wants to admit that, but realistically, that's where it's at. Spa was their 4th straight race without capturing a point. And the team hasn't executed their weekends very well either. I mean, they messed up both drivers' timings in Spa during qualifying, and I think they really need to look at where these struggles are coming from, start putting together cleaner weekends so they can come back and try and fight for some points. I mean, Adam, it hasn't. I with Andreas Seidel moving over to that team, and yeah, they've had some things happening behind the scenes and restructuring, and yes, they've got to prepare for Audi as well. But I still think at the end of the day that it was a pretty competitive car last season, and coming into this season, it just doesn't look like they've made a step at all.
No, it doesn't. And it's the Sauber group needs to do a better job of building the hype for Audi. I mean, Audi's coming in 26. So you got 2 more years after this one to really get people pumped up. And I think the Alfa Romeo branding, if I'm not mistaken, is gone at the end of 24. Am I wrong on that one?
Yeah, I think actually it's gone at the end of this season, if I'm not mistaken.
So that's apparently that's gonna go to Haas. They're still talking about that, but I don't know what they're gonna call themselves. But the thing is, Tim, and I give them a just a solid C- on that. Again, this is a car that was competitive last year. So what changed? What happened? And the great thing is for them, I know Formula One is like a 90% engineer sport. At very least, their drivers are a highlight, right? Yeah. Their drivers have done a good job. But you're going to have to look at, and you always talk about this when you have a new team principal, it takes years to change things up. They're going to have to look at race strategy. They're going to have to look at tire degradation. And they're going to have to look up straightaway speed. They just don't have it. And I don't know what it is that holds the car back from that, because I don't have the technical knowledge that you have. But I'll tell you, from a fan's perspective, I'm really sort of surprised by their step back this year.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just not thrilled with them. But I think their driver line is pretty good.
And a lack of execution on the upgrade side. And I think like when you're a team that has resources and you have your own wind tunnel at your home base, which some of these teams don't have, especially teams that are in front of them. They don't have their own wind tunnels at their home base. And now in this era in Formula One, it's such a huge thing. I think they just need to do a little better on that side. And totally. I think with Andreas Seidel there, things will get turned around eventually. I mean, he's a very competent motorsports person, and I think he's going to make this team very competitive, but it does look like they've taken a huge step backwards. As for their drivers, we'll start with Valtteri Bottas, 15th in the standings with 5 points. I'm giving Valtteri a C+ on this one, Adam. It's been a difficult season for Valtteri. I mean, tough for him to find his consistency within the race weekends, but I think he's done a very decent job to manage some points when they are in the offering. And look, I do understand that like this car is probably, well, I mean, he's also came out and said that this car is not that difficult sort of to drive, but I mean, when you're kind of saying that, I'm expecting a little bit more from him. Mm-hmm. He has had some decent performances. I guess I'm just looking for a little more consistency from him.
Yeah, I mean, Valtteri, I gave him a B-, so we're right in the same range there, Tim. He's like a qualifying master. This is what he's really known for those. I mean, that was what he was great at with Mercedes as well, which puts him in good spot to start each race. But it's hard to see him even doing that this year, and I don't know how much of that is down to the car, but it feels like it is. I think they're going to have a mediocre rest of the year, but and probably a much better start next year. But the one thing I like about Valtteri is that he is whatever he is, whatever the car is, and wherever he is, he's consistently that. He's always sort of in the same spot. So
good point.
If the range of the car is your best finish is a 12 to a 15, that's usually where he is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I'll take that any day in a down season. And I think he's also a really good teammate to Zhou Guanyu. And I think Zhou Guanyu obviously doesn't need to be, have his hand held. But I think it's important to have, when you have a team that's struggling like they are, some good back and forth, and you never hear of any drama from Alfa Romeo. They're never in the headlines. It's just, that's not a great year. That's all it is.
Yeah, that's a really good point you make. I mean, both drivers working really well. I mean, I have to give a little more credit to Valtteri too when we consider. You know what? I think I'm going to change my. You got me convinced, man. I'm going with a B- for Valtteri.
All right.
You convinced me, man. You turned that around. I was stuck in that C+, dude. Now, like, you got me switched only because now that I think about this, I'm like, you know what? I mean, Bottas rarely ever complains about anything,
and he should,
and he should for sure, considering where he has come from, which was the top at Mercedes, and now he's kind of come down to sort of this midfield team, and where Alfa Romeo was last season compared to where they are right now. I mean, it's kind of two different things, and I think he's done a good job of keeping his composure.
Yes.
And so for that, and because usually a lot of these drivers can't, after a while, they just said, screw it. I had enough. I'm going off right now. And then they light somebody up. And so I think, I'm going B-, man. That's actually good.
All right.
Yeah,
and he's also pretty with that mullet and the mustache. He's pretty marketable now.
Solid. That's solid. All right. Zhou Guanyu, 16th in the standings. He's got 4 points. He's right behind Valtteri in the driver standings. I think Zhou, I'm going with a B on this. He's had a nice second season to his F1 career. I think he's done like a really good job, considering it usually takes drivers about 3 years to kind of find their footing in Formula One. I think he's really shown up and has pushed Valtteri massively, and he's taken what Valtteri's taught him and he's put it into execution. And I think he's a really good driver to boot. I can see him going far in F1, Adam, if he's able to get another contract with this team.
I can too. I have him at a B-. We're right there. I think he's really impressive. And I gave these guys, I sort of graded them on a curve, because you're graded against Max Verstappen. He's the bar.
Yeah.
And you're also graded against the quality of car that you're driving on.
Yeah.
And for a second-year driver who, again, like Valtteri, says nothing, doesn't light anybody up, doesn't say anything. It's just, I'm going to do my race. He always seems to have a really good attitude. I love seeing his Instagram posts too, like what he's doing in his off breaks. He seems like he's a really cultured guy, and he's going around and kind of living the F1 life a little bit, but not unlike the Edge, just sort of enjoying it. It's nice to see him sort of settle in and be comfortable. And I think there's an extension in the works. I think I was reading this morning that they're either close to, or they have signed an extension for next year and potentially the year after. So good for him. B-. The fact that he has any points at all, bless them both.
Yes. Yeah, good point. We'll move over to Haas. They're 8th in the constructors standings with 11 points. I'm going with B- for Haas, and you may be surprised by that, but
I am.
Let me walk you through why. We'll start with the upgrade department. So if we go back to last year, I mean, their upgrades schedule was not very aggressive. They really didn't have anything that they brought to the track. I think it was Kevin Magnussen. It was the last race before summer break in 2022. It was a big upgrade package that they had brought for that car. And then Mick got it for the following race that was after summer break. And they kind of really dropped back after that. They really didn't stay that competitive. They had some flashes, and they had a great performance in Brazil. But then if we come into this season, their upgrades, the team brought something that was really interesting to the team. They introduced I think it's called a PIDOT sensor on its car that they hoped would help them understand their in-race tire deg. So they've had a lot of issues with tire degradation within the actual race itself. So the car qualifies well, but then it drops like a stone once it gets into the race. So the sensor fits on the middle part of the nose of the car. It measures lower aerodynamic disturbances. It is designed to help the team, data gather and to just get a better understanding of race tire wear. I think as the season has progressed for this team, they've had some really impressive qualifying performances so far this season. Canadian Grand Prix is one that stands out with Nico Hülkenberg qualified second, and then he was sent back to fifth because of his penalty for driving too fast during the Q3 red flag. But in the race, fell back to 15th. But they've seen these really solid quality performances just drop off a cliff in these races because of that tire deg, and it gets worse when running in traffic in the race as well. They've had some impressive qualities, like I said, but I would say it's definitely better than last season so far, and that's why I'm giving them a grade of B-, just because at least the qualifying performances have been somewhat consistent. It's the races and just trying to figure out the car a little bit more that's been holding them back, where last season it was really up and down.
Yeah, I mean, they had a great start last year. That first 5 race thing was pretty spectacular. I gave them a C. And the reason I give them a C is I expected them to take a step forward. And they are exactly sort of where they were last year without the great start. The one thing that you nailed is the fact that the qualifying has been strong for them at points. But at a certain point, you got to ask, like, when is this car going to take a step forward? When is this team going to take a step forward? It's been 5 years since they finished fifth. It's not that I need them to finish fifth this year, but seventh, I think, is something that should have been attainable. And I think it still might be, but I don't know. The way that Williams is going, and we'll get to them, I don't know that they're going to catch them. And I'm not blaming that. I'm not putting that at the feet of Gunther Steiner. I'm not putting that at the feet of the drivers. I just kind of go like, okay, guys, like, where is this consistency? There's always the crazy thing about Haas. It's just, I don't know how they do it, but every year it's like, we have a good car, but there's one fatal flaw that comes up every race. And you're like, oh, the car's not good in traffic. That's how you start every race, in traffic. That's where you gain the most. What do you mean the car's not good in traffic? Can you imagine marketing a car? Like imagine just like Toyota, Ford, BMW going, you guys are going to love this $100,000 car. It's a great family car. Just don't get it stuck in a traffic jam. Like that is just anathema. But that's where they're at. And I personally, like, I'm I'm obviously a McLaren guy through and through. I root for Haas because they are the tiny sort of team that could. They don't have the resources that even like a Williams would have. And I'm a little bit annoyed. I'm a little bit frustrated, I guess.
I think like one of the other things too that, we have to kind of take a look at is obviously the drivers. I think, one driver in particular may be holding them back just a tiny bit right now, and that's Kevin Magnussen. We'll get into what I think about all of that in a second. I just think the qualifying performances, if you can get both cars being consistent in those quality performances, where right now it's actually been Nico Hülkenberg, I think you have a better chance of kind of scoring a few more points. Hülkenberg's 14th in the driver's standings. He has 9 points. I gave Nico a B+. First time back, full time in F1. It's quite a few years. He's really been impressive, and I think most notably, taking, just taking some really good risks in qualifying that have kind of really paid off.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Oh yeah.
I think he hasn't squandered any of those where the car has been good. He's really executed, is what I'm trying to say. The racing, I think, for him would go better if the team can find that balance for the races where the tire deg doesn't just drop off a cliff. I think Australia was a strong race for him, finishing 7th, capturing a good haul of points. I think Hülkenberg will be in line for an extension at this team as well. That's why I'm giving him a grade of B+.
I'm giving him a C+, and it's not because of anything. If that's not an insult, it's like with Ricardo. Right? I'm being a little bit hard on my grades here. Ricardo got a C+. That's a compliment. Nico gets a C+. I think the thing about Nico Hülkenberg that I like the most, obviously, his qualifying has been pretty spectacular this year. It's really been the highlight. Does a killer one lap, this guy. But what I have never heard, what I have not seen one headline on is, did Haas make the right choice in replacing Mick Schumacher? And I think that says an awful lot. Not even the German papers, who are notoriously pro Schumacher, and who can blame them, are saying anything along the lines of, hey, boy, did Haas make a bad decision letting our boy Mick go. Nico Hulkenberg really hasn't brought it. Well, he has brought it. And it kind of makes you wonder, Tim, like, how did a guy like Nico Hulkenberg, who is doing what he can with that car, sit on the sidelines for a year when so many race teams are looking for a guy just like him?
Yeah.
And he's the perfect B driver on a mid-pack team. And I don't mean that as an insult. I'm sure he would hate that. But the only thing about Nico Hulkenberg that anybody's been ever been able to say is that he's got extreme talent. He's very fast, but he's never got a podium. So he shouldn't be an F1 anymore. I mean that's the thing. Like I'm really impressed with Nico Hulkenberg, but I think given his results in the past with Renault and some of the other teams he raced for, I can't even remember if he raced for any other teams, to be honest with you. Renault is what I remember him with.
Force India.
Oh, Force India, of course. He's
Williams.
always been Nico. He's always been Nico.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I'm really impressed with him.
Yeah. I think like you make a good point with the Schumacher note, but I think if the team could, get Magnussen back to Magnussen of last year,
yeah,
then I think that's, you've made the argument that, he should have been replaced. The problem, I think, is, Kevin's just having a really rough start to this, first half of the season. He's 18th in the standings. He only has 2 points compared to his teammate who has 9 points.
Yeah.
I'm giving him a grade of C. It hasn't been good. Struggled in qualifying. Doesn't have the same confidence with the car that he had last year by the looks of it. He had a nice race in Saudi Arabia, finishing 10th. Had some good performances in Miami as well. Miami in qualifying. That really stands out to me because that's a tough track, tough conditions. Just held on to 10th and got a point there. But it's like I said, just rough from there on out. The next 7 races: Monaco, DNF, Spain 18th, Canada 17th, Austria 18th, British Grand Prix DNF, Hungary 17th, Belgium 15th. Not sure if they'll be. I don't know if they're going to bring him back for another season either. I know Gunther Steiner wanted to have his 2024 driver lineup secured by the summer break, and that hasn't happened yet. So I'm going with the greatest C for Kevin.
I'm giving him a D+, man. Genuinely, like, not sure what to say here. I'm cheering for the guy because I do like him a lot. He's a guy you can get behind.
He's a racer.
He is a racer, and I know, like, he and his wife just had a baby as well, and that can kill your sleep and change your focus and all that sort of stuff too. But this is his career in F1 is again on the line here. I'm not, by the way, I'm only saying that from personal experience. I couldn't race a car and have a baby at the same time. And it was just, I didn't sleep at all when Everly was born. It was outrageous the amount of sleep I lost. But I'm saying in all honesty, if you just look at qualifying, which is where they've been good, he's no match for Nico. And I think that sort of says it all, right? He's had an extra year in this car. Nico has come in after a couple years off and really run him over. And I like Kevin Magnussen a lot, and I want him to succeed. So I hope the back half is better. But consistency, Tim. Even if he only picks up a few points, but he's consistently like 12th or 13th.
Yeah,
I think they have to re-sign him at that point.
Yeah, I agree because at that point we're kind of talking like he's there to score points. He's giving the team that chance to, if somebody drops out of a points paying position, Kevin's kind of there to snap it up. Same with Nico. So if they can just find a way of getting Kevin, I guess, a little bit closer to Hulkenberg in terms of the quality pace, so they can get in a good position to both of them try and score good points and get a better understanding with the car and the tire deg. Then I don't see why Kevin can't bounce back in the second half of the season. Let's head over to Williams, 7th in the constructors with 11 points. Actually, really quite happy with what Williams has done here. I'm giving them a grade of B+. I mean, if we just talk about upgrades real quick. They introduced a big one at the Canadian Grand Prix, new floor, side pods, modified rear suspension, which isn't an easy thing to just bring to a car. 23 upgrades, I think, up to that point. Pushing to be a consistent Q2 car, which they appear to be. That was the goal. There shouldn't be any more major upgrades, I don't think, moving forward. Just a few tweaks probably for them. And then I think I also look at internally when I look at, some of these teams and where they're at and their successes. When we look at hires for Williams, I mean, James Vowles, being brought over by Doralton, started at the team at the beginning of the season. He's had a lot of work to do there. I think he's made some really nice hires since coming on. Canadian Frederic Brasseau as his COO, adding him was smart. Brasseau comes from a Pratt in Whitney, where he worked on their Mirabel Aerospace Center and oversaw the opening of the facility, and it's the
cool
state of the art production line for the engines and the Airbus A220. So he was kind of all up in that. Then moved over to be their vice president. I think also for James getting his hands on Pat Fry, arguably the first major move by Vowles to snap him away from Alpine. Fry will become the chief technical officer, and is the first since Patty Lowe. So that's got to be 2018, 2019 since they've had chief technical officer. So Fry will join on November 1st. Worked at Ferrari, worked at McLaren for like 17 years. Had a stint with the Alpine team there in Manor. So I think Vowles now finally has a real sort of technical structure at that team that they can work with. I think they need a new head of aerodynamics, but I think after a while, Adam, that'll come along. They started the season off really well. It looked like they had a sizable jump from the 2022 car. Alex Albon scored the first points for the team with a 10th place finish in Bahrain. We're hoping for a points finish at Spa, which was a track they had targeted that would have worked well for their car. I think Monza is probably going to be the next weekend for them where they should be scoring some points, but I'm going to give them a grade a B plus. I think Williams as a whole is a B plus. Great turnaround to begin this season and nailed their major upgrades.
I think you're bang on the money there. I think if you were to grade them against the rest of the field, like remember they're still a lower middle team, right? Like they are. Seventh place is the best of the worst. I hate to put it that way. But Williams are my favorite story this year. I'm giving them a C plus, but again, it's because I'm grading them against Red Bull, right? But if you grade them against last year's car, they're an A team. Like that is really, it's incredible. So I'm not trying to be a jerk here, but it's incredible what they've done with a short amount of time. And Tim, I think their straightaway speed to me is what's been so impressive, right? This is a car the car had no balance, no brakes, no cornering, and absolutely no speed. They had no chance the last 5-6 years. It's not been good. But the sport is better when Williams is on the rise. It's a team that is a legendary team, and they should be like McLaren. And like Ferrari, they are sort of the legendary teams in the sport. They need to be teams that they should be in the top 5. And I hope they get there eventually. Blown away by what they've done this year. And obviously I know we're going to take it to the drivers in a second. I think if you have more consistent, driver, results out of both drivers, then I give them a higher grade. But one is obviously really overperforming and one is not quite there yet, but we can talk about that now, I guess. So I guess, who do you want to start with?
Yeah, let's start with Alex Albon. We'll go back to the Canadian Grand Prix where Adam Wilde had Alex way into his top 10 on the driver rankings. Adam, I'm going to take the old hat off to you because that was a good call, dude.
He's been amazing.
He has been. I'm giving Alex a grade of A. 13th in the driver standings. He's got 11 points. Highest finish was 7th at that Canadian Grand Prix. And that was an incredible drive from Alex. That was a championship driver's drive. He was amazing to keep the group of cars he had behind him for most of that race behind him. Very impressive. 8th at the British Grand Prix as well. And I just think he's done a really nice job here this season. And you can see the confidence coming from him now,
That car was double wide at the Canadian Grand Prix. Just huge. Like, I know the cars are getting bigger, but his car looked huge. I'm with you, Tim. I gave him an A minus. I'm so impressed. The guy has done something with that car. And really, the strength of the Williams is straightaway speed. I don't know that they've got great balance quite yet. and their braking, it's better, but it needs to be improved, right? That's why they don't do as well in the cornering, the kind of the windy circuits. But man, like when you look at the gap to his teammate, even though his teammate's a rookie, this is an improved Williams, and really he's the only one getting the results in terms of points. And when you look at the overtaking of the cars in the field that are comparable, so you look at Haas, you look at Alfa Romeo, you look at Williams versus those guys, and there's an AlphaTuari, which just doesn't even seem fair, honestly. Albon is able to pass them all. He is the best of that field. There's no question. The car is a part of it, but I also think, and it was interesting that there was some conversations about apparently Red Bull had reapproached him to join back into the Red Bull program. And I don't blame him for saying no. Yeah. If I were Alex Albon, I'm like, I'm the lead driver at a legendary team that is now on the rise. Like, if Alpine continues to have the problems that they have, which is just absolute chaos at every level, cannot manage themselves despite all the money in the world, is it far-fetched next year to say that Williams could be nipping at Alpine's heels? Is sixth place out of their seventh now? Is sixth place out really that out there? And if I'm Albon, I want to be the lead guy now. Yeah. I've been Verstappen's second guy. I've been a Toro Rosso. I don't need that anymore. I want to be a guy on a team that's going somewhere. And with James Vowles in there and the team that he's putting together, I don't blame him for just saying I'm staying with Mercedes, or I'm staying with Williams Mercedes. Yeah,
great point that you make. I mean, when you're a driver in Alex's position, I mean, essentially, if he can just keep performing, they'll just build the team around him, and that's a brilliant move by Alex to do that. I mean, considering where his F1 career was, so when he left F2 to move into F1. I was like, he's a really good driver. I mean, I know firsthand just how good Alex Albon, is and was in the Formula 2 days. He was teammates with Nicholas Latifi, and Alex was top line talent. He is extremely good, extremely fast. Probably the fastest hands on the grid, and also some of the best car control I have ever seen. And I think that's what separates him and his teammates, and in particular Logan Sargent. Logan has 0 points right now. His highest finish, 11th at the British Grand Prix. He had a 12th in Bahrain at the beginning of the season, and has had some okay qualifyings. I mean, the one in Saudi Arabia stands out the most to me, where he would have had a really good qualifying. He didn't get penalized for going over going over the white line by start finish straight away and had the lap time deleted. Same thing, I think, if I remember correctly, at the British Grand Prix, he had a few lap times deleted there that may have really bumped him up the pack a little bit more. I think for Logan, it's great a C+ from me. I think the only thing that's keeping it from a B is just I need to see a little bit more this season. Granted, I think we all knew from him coming from Formula 2 and then moving into Formula 1, it was going to be a really tall order for him to hang on with Alex in the first season. I think for Logan, it's a really difficult car to drive. I think it's a car that particularly suits Alex's driving style, which, Alex can just hang on to a car. He's got great car control. And I think for, maybe some drivers that it kind of gets in the way of the confidence a bit and to push, because you don't want to crash the car. You don't want to wreck anything. So I think for a driver like Logan, I'd like to see him back in Formula 1 for a second season so we can get like a clearer picture of what his trajectory is. I don't think we're really seeing enough at this moment, but also excited to see what he can do in the second half of this season, because even though I am giving him a grade of C+, I don't think he's a bad driver. I actually think he's a really good driver, and we just have to go back to that time in Formula 3 when he was pushing Oscar Piastri for the championship.
Yeah, and I think he's a fast track driver. That's why you saw Silverstone, be his best result, because I think I think in every other level he's done extraordinarily well at Silverstone. If Logan Sargent is a year 3 driver, this grade is a D. but because he's a rookie, I'm going to give him a C plus. And you're right. So he steps into a team that's undergoing a lot of change. The guy that hired him was like fired a few months later. And I've been in those situations. My first job in radio, the guy that hired me, I've still never met him face to face. He was gone 2 weeks later. And the next boss was not thrilled about having a 19-year-old on the air. It can be very difficult, very challenging on that end. And then you got Albon, who has raced for, Rosso and then, Red Bull's seat 2 and has a ton of experience and now a ton of confidence. There's a lot of tricky things that go into Logan Sargent's start. He's got to close the gap a little bit between Alex Albon and himself. I do feel like, Tim, there's something there. I don't know if I compare him against Oscar Piastri, which I think until a couple weeks ago was a pretty fair comparison, car-wise. They weren't much different. The thing is, Piastri is far and away better. There's no question. Far and away better. If you put Logan Sargent in that McLaren car, there's no way he's doing what Piastri has done. Doesn't mean that it's not like that he doesn't belong in Formula One. You look at Yuki Tsunoda and the development curve he was on. His first year was pretty bad by Formula One standards, but he's a rookie. So I think Logan Sargent has to prove that the flashes of what we could see, and I did actually I liked what he did at Silverstone. People were like, well, he should have got points. I'm like, rookie, give him a pass on that. I want to see what he does at Monza before I really start to pass a judgment on how his season goes. Yeah. There's no question here. Formula One needs an American driver on the grid for marketing purposes. And I also think that he belongs there right now. I just want to see more. And I think probably if you were to ask him, he would see the same.
Yeah. I think, and granted, James Vowles does really like Logan, believes in him, and thinks totally. There's a lot of talent there. I just think it's going to take a bit of time for Logan to kind of really make that next sort of step. I mean, it's not easy. This is Formula One, but again, you made a good point with Yuki Tsunoda. I mean, his first year is pretty troublesome, but then after that, he's gotten better as the years have kind of rolled along. And I think Logan Sargent would be on a similar sort of trajectory where if we get to year 2, I think he takes that next step. But yeah, Imola is a great spot to see what else Logan can do. Yeah, no, it's true because, excuse me, Monza.
Yeah,
right
no, Imola had it. Yeah, I'm like, did I mess it up?
No, you
it's
didn't
still
mess
early
up anything.
Here.
Oh my God,
Monza's it's a speed track, right? So you expect those drivers to really stand out.
Yeah, for sure. I think for them, I think they're going to have the car for that track. And so, yeah, I think that's a good statement you make. Monza would be the right place to really see where he's at. Adam, this has been great. Thanks for doing this. We're going to do 2 more parts. Look out for the next one on Monday or Sunday evening in your podcast feeds. Adam, you still on vacation or what's going on here?
When are you ever on vacation, really? Come on.
I love it. Thanks so much for taking the time, dude, to do this. It's been
Tim,
a lot
it's
of
an
fun,
honor to be
always.
on your show, my friend.